It started with laughter, the easy kind that doesn't belong to the truth, the kind that lives only in polished glasses and artificial lights. I remember the glow of the chandeliers trembling across the hall, as if even they were holding their breath for me. 50 years of service, a lifetime of headlines, and a speech I'd rehearsed for weeks, all leading to this moment. But when my son stood up, everything inside me went still. He didn't look like my boy anymore. He looked like someone who dug through my bones and found the rot underneath. His voice was steady at first, cutting through the chatter like a blade. This man ruined my life. Silence. Pure surgical silence. The laughter died before it could finish. Forks froze halfway to mouths. My wife's hand hovered near her glass but never touched it. Her eyes, God, those eyes weren't shocked. They were tired, like she'd already lived this scene in her head 1,000 times and was just waiting for me to arrive. I didn't move, not even to breathe. Adam's words echoed against the glass walls, raw and naked. People shifted in their seats, unsure if they should leave or pretend this was all part of some theatrical family joke. But there was no punchline. Just the truth, ugly and alive. He didn't shout again. He didn't have to. He just stood there, jaw trembling, tears making a path down the same cheekbones I'd given him. I wanted to say something, anything, but every sentence I'd ever built sounded like an excuse. I stared at the red wine in my hand, its surface rippling like it was afraid too. My reflection wavered inside the glass, a man dressed in praise, drowning in guilt. I could hear the air conditioner hum, the faint click of someone's camera shutting off. The applause that once filled this room had turned into the kind of silence that kills reputations. I smiled. Reflex, not emotion. Because men like me don't break, we pose. We bleed behind closed doors, never in public. The host tried to save me, God bless him. Tapped his microphone, cleared his throat, muttered something about a family misunderstanding. But everyone knew. You can't unsay a sentence like that. You can only live under it. I stood up slowly. The chair screeched like it was protesting. My knees cracked, my heart too. I walked toward the podium, every step a negotiation between pride and collapse. Adam had already left his seat. The door swung shut behind him like a final verdict. When I reached the microphone, my throat burned. The lights were too bright. I could feel every eye on me. Colleagues, investors, old friends pretending not to judge. They didn't want an explanation. They wanted a story to take home. Sometimes, I said quietly, my voice thin but sharp, the people we build our lives for are the ones we bury beneath it. And for the first time that night, they actually listened. I didn't finish my speech. How could I? Every word I'd written was a lie dressed as gratitude. I looked at the paper in my hand, creased, shaking, and realized it wasn't a speech anymore. It was a confession. I folded it neatly and set it aside. The applause didn't come. Not this time. Only the sound of one person walking away down a hallway that suddenly felt too long. I kept my eyes on the empty door where Adam had been, and all I could think was, this isn't how he was supposed to leave me. I wanted to chase him. I wanted to grab his shoulders, look him in the eye, and remind him that everything I did for him. That every late night, every closed deal, every lie I buried was just a brick in the empire I thought would keep him safe. But I stayed where I was because pride is heavier than love, and I've carried it too long to set it down now. The host whispered something about wrapping up the evening. The lights dimmed. Someone coughed. My wife brushed past me without a word, her perfume fading faster than her patience. That's when I realized, retirement isn't an ending. It's a reckoning. I stayed after everyone left. The waiters cleared the tables around me, stacking plates and scraping laughter off the floors. The hall smelled of wilted flowers and cold meat. My plaque still sat on the podium, untouched, a golden reminder of everything I'd built and everyone I'd broken doing it. I ran my thumb over the engraved words. To Dr. William Hart, a legacy of leadership. Legacy. Such a beautiful word for something so dishonest. The truth is, my legacy didn't start in that room. It started 20 years ago in an office that smelled of ambition and disinfectant. Back then I was younger, hungrier. My son was 8, his head full of dreams about space and oceans, not politics or business. He used to wait for me by the window when I worked late. I'd see his small shadow on the curtain when I pulled into the driveway. That shadow, hopeful, loyal, innocent, was what kept me chasing success. But somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing for him and started chasing instead of him. That night, When I came home with another promotion and a bottle of champagne, he was already asleep. My wife had fallen asleep on the couch waiting. The house smelled like burnt dinner and disappointment. I told myself it was temporary, that missing birthdays was the price of progress. That silence could be fixed with money, and for a while, it worked. Then came the decision, the one that made me rich and made him hate me. A project, a deal that wasn't entirely clean but promised everything: prestige, power, permanence. I told myself it was for the family, but I knew deep down it was for me. I remember signing that contract. My pen didn't tremble. My conscience did. That was the night I traded truth for legacy. I poured myself another glass now, sitting in the empty banquet hall. The wine tasted metallic, like regret trying to disguise itself as something elegant. My reflection in the glass was older, colder, a man built out of justifications. What hurt most wasn't what Adam said. It was that he was right. He didn't just ruin my party. He exposed the lie I'd been living comfortably inside. And maybe that's what children are meant to do, to show you the kind of man you really are when the applause fades. I thought about the first time he shouted at me. He was 16, standing at the foot of the stairs, fists clenched, eyes wild. "You're never here! You don't even know who I am anymore." And I said something cruel, something rehearsed. "Everything you have is because of me." He flinched like I'd hit him. Maybe I did, just not with my hands. He left the next morning without breakfast. My wife followed 2 months later. She said I'd turned our home into a mausoleum for my ego. I told her she'd never understand, and yet tonight when I looked at her in that hall, I saw something worse than anger. Pity. She knew this was coming. Maybe they both did. I took another sip, leaned back, and let the weight of the silence settle. My whole life I'd been the man who fixed things, budgets, teams, crises. But there are some things you can't fix. You can only watch them rot in slow motion. The janitor flicked the lights once, a polite warning. I nodded, but I didn't move. Outside the tall glass windows, the city lights blurred through the rain. My reflection merged with them, half man, half ghost. I wondered if Adam was still somewhere in this city, still burning with that same fury, or if he'd already decided to vanish from me completely. It's strange how quickly love can turn into evidence. One sentence, "This man ruined my life," and suddenly everything you did for love becomes proof of your crimes. Maybe he'll never forgive me. Maybe he shouldn't. But forgiveness isn't what I came here for tonight. I came for survival. And survival demands sacrifice, always has. I set the wine glass down, its rim marked with a smear of red. Blood or Merlot, who could tell anymore? Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared days ago, his name written across it in my old, tired handwriting. Adam. Inside, the truth waited. Cold, heavy, final. He thinks he knows what I did. He doesn't know why. The envelope was thin, but it felt heavier than any trophy I'd ever lifted. I held it in both hands the way you'd hold something alive, something dangerous. Inside was everything I'd never said aloud. Copies of the deal, the names, the signatures that should have buried me years ago, the truth he thinks I hid out of cowardice. But he's wrong. I hid it out of love. You see, when the investigation started, when whispers turned to headlines, I had two choices. I could fall on the sword and watch my family drown in my name, or I could rewrite the story and let a few good men take the fall. And I chose us. I chose Adam. I chose his future. I told myself that any man would have done the same. Wouldn't you? I paid off the lawyers, burned the drafts, smiled for the cameras. And when they handed me the award for integrity and leadership, I smiled again because I'd convinced myself that integrity was just another form of endurance. But the past has a way of surviving the fire. He found it last year.
I don't know how.
Maybe his mother told him, maybe he dug too deep into old files. Either way, the look in his eyes when he confronted me wasn't anger. It was recognition. He saw what he could become if he kept loving me. He said, "You built a world where truth doesn't live." I told him, "Truth doesn't feed a family." He said, "Neither does guilt." He left that night, and I haven't heard his voice since until tonight. I ran my thumb over the flap of the envelope. I'd meant to give it to him tonight, after the speeches, after the applause, when the cameras were gone and we could be two men again instead of father and son. But he beat me to it. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent a lifetime controlling the narrative, only for my own blood to seize the microphone. I stared at the empty doorway where he'd stood, and the hall seemed to echo with a sound only I could hear, his voice as a child. The one that used to say, "Tell me a story, Dad." And I always did. Just never the true one. Maybe that's all I've ever done, told stories. About honor, about sacrifice, about what a man must do to protect what's his. I just never asked what happens when what's his stops wanting protection. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket. I'd find him. Not tonight, he needed time to hate me first, but soon. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was heavy, wet with static. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks again. I stepped out into it, the city stretching before me like a wound. As I walked toward the car, I caught my reflection in the glass doors, half lit, half shadow. The man everyone had toasted, still pretending the world owed him forgiveness. But I wasn't looking for forgiveness anymore. I was looking for control. He thinks he ended my legacy tonight. He's wrong, because I didn't build my empire on trust. I built it on leverage. And there's one thing Adam still doesn't understand. A man can lose everything, even his son, and still win if he knows where the bodies are buried. I paused at the car door, the city humming faintly in the distance. My hand tightened around the envelope in my pocket. "I did ruin your life," I whispered to the night, "but I made sure you'd have one to ruin." The rain began again, soft, measured, almost cleansing. As I drove away from the banquet hall, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The building shrank into darkness, its lights flickering like dying memories. My reflection stared back, pale and unfamiliar. People think retirement means rest, but for men like me, it's just when the ghosts get louder. And tonight they all have my son's voice. They called me the architect of reform. That was the headline. My face printed beside it, smiling, confident, righteous. The article said I'd rebuilt a broken system, that I'd brought order to chaos. They wrote words like visionary, pillar, hero. I cut the page out and framed it on my office wall. But I never looked at it for long, because I knew what was behind it. The other files, the ones without signatures, the ones that never made it to print. They weren't reforms. They were trades, names for favors, lives for signatures. I told myself it was all balance. The greater good, the necessary evil. You can't build a clean empire in a dirty world. Someone has to get their hands stained. And mine? I bathed in it, but back then I could still sleep. I had a story that made it all sound noble. It's for my family. I repeated that lie so often it started to sound like prayer. The new house, the car, the scholarships, when all of it bought with ink and silence. Adam never knew. He thought I worked late because I cared. He thought my hands were tired from writing speeches, not rewriting truth, until the night he found the box. It was a Thursday. I remember because the roast burned. The smell of it still clings to that night in my mind, thick and bitter. The kitchen was filled with smoke. My wife was laughing nervously and Adam was quiet. Too quiet. He'd come home from college that weekend. I didn't ask why. I just assumed it was for the usual reasons: money, laundry, guilt. I was in the study when he knocked. "Dad?" His voice didn't sound like his own. "In here," I said, not looking up. "Door's open." He stepped inside. He didn't sit. He didn't even look at me. Just stood there, holding something. A brown folder, edges worn, seal broken. My chest went cold. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "In the attic," he said. "It had your initials." I could hear my pulse in my ears. That folder wasn't supposed to exist. I'd burned everything years ago, or thought I had. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. The one thing I missed had found its way into my son's hands. He laid the documents on my desk. Pages of old contracts. Backroom donations, bribes disguised as community investments. My name was on every line. My signature under every betrayal. "Adam," I started. "You don't understand what this was." He cut me off. "No, I think I do." His voice trembled, but his hands didn't. "You traded lives for mine." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because the worst part was he was right. I told myself it wasn't like that. I told him I did it for him, for us, for the future. But every explanation felt like dragging glass across the truth. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared at me, the same way he did at the retirement party, like he was watching someone he used to love decay in real time. He picked up one paper. "This man," he said, tapping the page, "you pushed him out of the housing deal. He lost everything. He was corrupt," I said automatically. "He was going to ruin." He looked at me then. eyes sharp enough to cut through the lie. So were you. The words didn't echo, they sank. Heavy, final. I wanted to reach for him, but he stepped back. The air between us turned into something unbreathable. He whispered, "I used to tell people you were my hero." Then he left. The sound of the door closing was louder than any accusation could have been. That was the night I learned a truth I'd spent decades burying. You can forgive a lie, but you can't unlearn it. The next morning, the house was quiet. His room empty again. The folder gone. My wife wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat at the table staring at the seat he'd left behind. The chair looked smaller somehow, as if it had caved under the weight of what I'd done. I poured myself a drink, too early, too strong, and stared out the window. The city skyline looked different now. I used to see progress. That morning I saw graves, because that's what deals really are. Unmarked graves that buy you comfort. And every scholarship, every headline, every plaque I'd ever hung on my wall was paid for with one more. I built my family a future. I just didn't realize it was on top of a burial ground. I didn't go to the office. I went to the addresses behind the names. I started with the one Adam pointed at, the man I pushed out of the housing deal. His building used to be brick with pride. Now it was brick with mildew. A rusted tricycle slept upside down in the courtyard like a trapped insect. I climbed 4 flights because the elevator had given up long before I ever considered telling the truth. He opened the door with the chain still on. He recognized me the way a wound recognizes the knife that made it. No yelling, no scene. Just a flat stare and a quiet, practiced sentence. "You here to buy the apology, Mr. Architect?" I said his name properly finally and asked to talk. He closed the door, unlatched the chain, opened it again, and walked away without inviting me in. Inside smelled like boiled cabbage in winter. A space heater ticked in the corner, doing math it could never solve. He didn't sit. Neither did I. I told him the thing cowards tell themselves when they're done being cowards. I was wrong. He waited. I told him what it cost him. He knew the numbers better than me. I offered money, the legal kind. He smiled with half his mouth. "You always think it's about money." Then he pointed past me toward a framed photo on a shelf. A graduation cap. A girl holding it by the tassel. "She didn't go," he said. "She deferred?" 2 years. Job at the clinic. Says she'll try again when the world stops owing you favors." His voice didn't crack. Mine did. I left the envelope anyway. He didn't touch it. Outside, the wind cut through my coat like it had memorized me. I called the fixer I swore I wouldn't call again. He answered with my old name, the one people used when they needed something moved without fingerprints. "You digging up coffins to lay on top of them?" he asked. "I'm trying to pay back ghosts," I said. He whistled once, the kind of sound men make when they see a bill arrive already past due. Restitution is clean until it's not. Do it wrong and it reads like hush. I told him I wasn't looking to be forgiven. He laughed softly. "No one with a microphone believes that." He gave me 3 numbers. Legal clinics, a bursar, a woman who handles back tuition scholarship reversals without turning them into headlines. "Move quiet," he said. "You don't get points for public penance." I hung up and moved quiet. By noon, I'd signed away 2 accounts I once guarded like oxygen. I put them in a trust with a name that wasn't mine. I called the bursar's office at the state college and told them a scholarship bearing my name would be renamed after a custodian who died during the winter outage I ignored because it wasn't my budget line. The clerk on the phone whispered, "Oh, not gratitude." Surprise tipped with pity. I took it like a receipt and kept moving. At 3, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't know. No greeting, no threat, just a link and 4 words. "You said you built." I tapped. A draft article opened, no byline yet, titled "The Architect's Ledger." My contracts were there. The donations that weren't donations. The shell accounts. The photo of the ribbon cutting where I said the word community like it was currency. At the bottom, a quote I'd never given. "He traded lives for mine." The sentence shook the glass around my heart. I scrolled to the top and found the note, "Submission pending." Publish scheduled Friday 9 a.m. tomorrow. I refreshed the page twice like it could change the past. It didn't. I drove to the river and parked where the concrete breaks into weeds. The sky hung low, color of old paperwork. I watched the water carry what it didn't want to hold and practiced a speech no one would believe. I did what I had to. I did what I thought was right. I did it for my family. Every version tasted like varnish, shiny, poisonous. I thought about calling Adam. I didn't want another silence I couldn't outtalk. Instead, I called the only other person who could say the thing I couldn't. My wife. It rang twice. She answered with my name like a question. I told her about the article. The trust. The door I stood in that didn't open or close just weighed. She didn't ask why I did it. She already knew. She asked what I was going to do now. I said, tell the truth. The pause on the line wasn't approval. It was inventory. Then don't narrate it, she said. Just do it. I went home to get one thing. The box I kept under the stairs, the one Adam didn't find because I hid it with the kind of skill only a guilty man learns. It wasn't documents. It was keepsakes I'd stopped earning. Drawings from second grade, a plastic medal that said coach, a photograph of us at the county fair with sugar on our faces, both of us pretending not to notice our mouths were blue. I held the photo and realized I'd been trying to buy something I'd been given for free and lost by choice. My email pinged. A reporter. We're running a piece in the morning. Do you want to comment on allegations that your reforms involved off-the-books negotiations and retaliatory zoning? She attached 3 documents redacted like I was a criminal and also a child. I didn't reply. I closed the laptop and opened a drawer and took out a pen that still had weight. Then I began writing letters the way men write wills, short, unadorned, trying to place things where they might do less harm. At dusk, I drove to Adam's apartment. I didn't go up. I sat across the street and watched the windows the way a thief studies a lock he has memorized and regrets ever learning. His light was on. The shape of him crossed the room once, then twice, then disappeared. I recorded a voicemail and deleted it. I recorded another and deleted that too. The third one I let live because it sounded least like strategy. I won't ask you to forgive me. I won't ask you to spare me. I'll just say this. There are men who ruin their sons by leaving and men who ruin their sons by staying. I should have learned the third way. I didn't. Tomorrow I'll tell the truth and I won't say your name. I hung up before I asked him to call back. I didn't deserve the chance to hear him breathe. On the way to the car, a man stepped from the alley and said my last name like a debt collection. Not a thug, a clerk. I could smell copier toner and cheap aftershave. He held out an envelope with my address in careful block letters. From the board, he said, special session. 8 a.m. public comment at 9. I took it. He didn't leave. He added quieter. My mom kept her apartment because of your winter plan. Not everyone you helped was clean. Then he walked away before I could ruin his gratitude by telling him which part of the plan I'd traded to make it possible. I drove aimless circles until the gaslight came on. Then I parked in front of City Hall. The marble stairs were the same steps I'd climbed to accept the award that started the article that will finish me. The banner for my retirement gala still hung in the lobby because no one had closed out the work order. Thank you for your service. I read it twice and tried to decide if service done for the wrong reason still counts when it lands in the right place. My phone vibrated. A voicemail from Adam. I didn't breathe while it played. His voice was low, tired, scraped thin. Don't posture tomorrow, he said. Don't lecture. Tell them you chose control because being a husband and a father scared you more than being important. And Dad, don't try to buy me back. The message clicked off. No goodbye. No I love you. But the mercy was there anyway. He'd left me a script shorter than a sentence. The night settled around the building like a verdict coming to temperature. I walked the corridor where my portrait will hang until they take it down or add a plaque that says context. I touched the frame with 2 fingers like a priest who's lost his faith but still remembers the gesture. Then went to the back room and checked the microphone because habits outlive belief. It worked. Everything still worked. On the steps outside, a woman waited with a binder pressed to her chest the way people hold a child at a crosswalk. You don't know me, she said. You helped my brother with a work permit after he got hurt. He's still mad at you. I'm not. I asked why she was here. Because I wanted to see if you'd come through the front door. I nodded. I didn't tell her I'd considered the side entrance twice. A final text lit the phone in my palm. The reporter again. We were told your son provided corroboration. Publish remains at 9 a.m. If you intend to make a statement before then, the livestream link is here. The link glowed under her signature like a fuse. I stared at it until my thumb started to shake. I went home for 3 hours and sat at the foot of the bed, shoes still on, tie still knotted, like a man waiting to hear hospital news. I didn't sleep. I didn't rehearse. I listened to the radiator knock and counted the hits like a metronome steadying a confession. When the clock turned its face to 6:17, I stood. I put the framed headline into a box. I left the box on the curb. Let the morning decide. At 7:52, I walked toward the front door of City Hall with the sun low and red, the color of receipts stamped paid. A small crowd grew like a rumor. Some of them clapped once by reflex and stopped when they remembered. A boy on a scooter passed and shouted my name as a question adults still hadn't answered for him. The clerk from last night nodded without smiling. The woman with the binder held it tighter. My wife stood under the overhang, hands in her coat, face empty of performative sorrow. She mouthed one word. Truth. Inside, the board chair adjusted her glasses and glanced at the clock. My name appeared on the agenda, Item 1, Statement. Microphones glinted like teeth. Cameras blinked their red eyelids open. My portrait on the far wall watched the room like a man trying to remember which version of himself earned a frame. The chair cleared her throat. We'll begin, she gestured. My legs moved without negotiating. I stood at the podium and set down notes I would not read. I placed both palms on the wood the way a man steadies himself before lifting something he should have asked help to carry years ago. The room quieted with that small electric hunger people bring to public punishment. I leaned into the microphone and inhaled the dust of old speeches. My name is... The sound of my voice startled me. It sounded like a door opening on its hinges after a winter of freezing shut. I started again. I built a reputation on the word reform. And then I protected it with other words I don't deserve. Integrity, accountability, community. I looked up. Some faces were stone. Some were human. One was my wife's, unblinking. One I could not find was my son's. I exhaled. I made trades I called necessary. I used people I called obstacles. I sold a future I said I was buying. I paused because the next two words were the heaviest thing I would ever lift in public. I'm sorry. They didn't thud. They didn't soar. They settled where they landed, exactly as heavy as they should be, no lighter. A hand went up in the gallery. The chair shook her head, no questions. The reporter's phone flashed like heat lightning. The live stream counter ticked higher. 9 o'clock was a wall I could not move. I had 3 minutes left to build something that wasn't a defense. I said, if there is to be repair, it won't be performed on a stage. I've set up a fund to pay back what I took, and yes, I know money isn't the same as time or dignity or trust. But it's the start I can make with the hands I damaged. I will resign every board, give back every plaque, and accept what comes with it. And I will not ask my son to carry my apology like a trophy. The last sentence left my mouth steadier than I felt. The clock above the chamber doors clicked to 8:59. Somewhere, a printer in a newsroom began to warm. I took my hands off the podium and let them hang where everyone could see them, empty at last. The chair leaned forward. Is that your full statement? I could feel the city leaning, too, toward spectacle, toward consequence, toward whatever I had not yet earned. I looked at the red light on the primary camera, alive and hungry, and said, no, it isn't. The room fell silent after I said it. No, it isn't. Every camera light blinked red, waiting for the sequel. The board chair straightened in her seat. You may continue, she said, voice tight with anticipation or fear. I couldn't tell which. I leaned closer to the mic, the taste of copper at the back of my throat. My son once asked me if I ever traded lives for his future. I began. I told him I hadn't, that everything I did was clean. My voice cracked, raw from holding back too much for too long. That was the last lie I told him. A ripple of whispers moved through the audience. Someone's pen stopped moving. The hum of the lights above filled the silence like static. I made decisions that bought comfort for my family and chaos for others. I told myself I was buying stability. But all I was really doing was buying silence, and theirs and mine. I took a breath. The houses, the schools, the contracts, they were all signed in invisible ink made of people's faith in me. The words came out steadier than I expected, almost rehearsed. Maybe because I'd been practicing them for years, in the mirror, in the dark, in the quiet between guilt and denial. I used to think I was protecting Adam, I said. I see now I was just protecting the story I built about myself. Someone coughed. Another camera flash stung my eyes. I looked straight into the lens. You want the truth? I didn't ruin my son's life. I built mine out of his innocence. And the day he stopped believing in me was the first honest day I ever had. The chair's pen froze midair. Mr. Hale, I cut her off. Don't call me that. Mr. Hale was the name printed under the word architect. Tonight that man's retired for good. When I stepped away from the podium, the applause didn't come. It shouldn't have. The cameras kept rolling, hungry for spectacle, but I was done feeding them. I walked past my portrait, the smile frozen, the eyes still pretending to deserve light, and out into the corridor. My wife was waiting by the exit, arms crossed. She didn't speak, just nodded once. That was her way of saying finally. Outside, the sky had that bruised pre-dawn glow again, the color between endings and beginnings. The city buzzed around us, unaware that a man had just dismantled himself live. She walked beside me to the car. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was clean. At the door, she said softly, "He saw the stream." I froze. "Adam?" She nodded. He sent one line. She handed me her phone, a message. "You finally stopped building excuses." I stared at it for a long moment, reading it twice. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't hate either. It was something in between, recognition. I typed back, "Maybe now we can build something real." No reply came, but that was fine. The silence was progress. We drove home slowly. The city looked smaller from the passenger window, almost fragile. Billboards still carried my face. "Thank you for your service," like a bad joke that hadn't been told to stop yet. At a red light, my wife said quietly, "You know they'll take everything." "I know," I said. "The pension, the house. I know. And the paper will crucify you by morning." I smiled faintly. "Then they'll finally get the headline right." She didn't laugh, but she didn't cry either. That was enough. When we reached home, I went straight to the study, the same room where Adam once laid those papers on my desk, where he tore the skin off my reputation with a single sentence. I opened the drawer where the frame used to sit. The architect of reform. Empty now, just the faint outline where dust hadn't settled. It looked better that way. Honest. On the desk sat the old family photo, the one I couldn't bring myself to burn. I picked it up. We were smiling, sunlight bleeding through the lens. Adam was 7, holding the toy hammer I'd bought him. He said he wanted to build things like Dad, and he did, just not the way I expected. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window, listening to the quiet rhythm of the night. For the first time in years, my hands weren't shaking. They were empty, and maybe that's what peace actually feels like. I spoke out loud even though no one was there. I was wrong to call what I did sacrifice. It wasn't sacrifice. It was theft dressed as duty. The room didn't answer, but I didn't need it to. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the last envelope, the one labeled Education Fund. Inside were documents transferring what was left of my accounts to an anonymous foundation under Adam's name. No headlines, no PR, no redemption tour. Just quiet repayment. I signed it. Not as a father or a builder or a reformer. Just as a man cleaning up after the storm he started. The next morning, the papers ran my photo again. Same face. Different caption. Former architect confesses, "I built a legacy of lies." I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. The city buzzed with opinion. Some called me brave. Most called me a fraud. Both were right. At noon, I walked by a construction site near the old riverfront. The workers were pouring fresh concrete, the smell of lime thick in the air. I stood there for a while, watching. There's something pure about building when you're not the one holding the blueprints. One of the foremen recognized me but didn't say a word. He just nodded, like a man who's seen enough regret to know what silence costs. I nodded back. That night, as the sun sank behind the cranes, I found myself back where it all began. The banquet hall. The lights were off, chairs stacked, floors bare except for the stains of spilled champagne and lost dignity. I walked to the center of the stage where my son had stood days ago, trembling with fury and grief. The microphone was gone. Only the echo of his words remained. This man ruined my life. Maybe he was right. But maybe I was finally giving him a reason to rebuild it. I closed my eyes, hearing the faint hum of the empty hall. For the first time in decades, I wasn't rehearsing what to say next. I whispered into the dark, "Adam, I didn't build a legacy. I built a warning." And as the lights of the city flickered through the cracks in the curtain, I knew it was enough. The night Carter lost his license, the city smelled like hot wires and wet stone. Sirens pulsed somewhere too far to help, and a neon bar sign clicked in a broken heartbeat that matched my own. I told myself I wasn't celebrating. I told myself I was witnessing consequences. Truth is, I was taking inventory of what I'd saved, of what I'd spent. A good man can lie with numbers. A better man can lie with silence. I was both. The board letter sat folded in my inside pocket. The one that said ethics breach verified without daring to say by whom. Carter never looked my way in that hearing. He stared dead center at the seal behind the judges like a drowning man memorizing the shape of the sky. When they took his license, his mouth didn't even open. Some defeats enter you through the eyes. I had reasons. Clean, laminated reasons. Protect the firm. Stabilize the fund. Save Adam's future from the bonfire Carter kept trying to light with his purity. Carter warned me the contract we'd signed with Temple and Marrow was a trap. Kickbacks hidden in relationship fees. A phantom vendor inflating invoices. A charity wing built to launder a backlog of favors. He wanted to take it public. I wanted to take it apart quietly, brick by dirty brick, without dragging my son's name through a lawsuit headline. We fought in the glass conference room while our reflections listened from the night dark window. "We fix it from inside," I said, calm like a surgeon. "You don't fix rot," he said, voice frayed. "You cut it out where everyone can see the scar." He meant the city. I heard the papers. He meant integrity. I heard Adam's tuition. When he refused to back down, I counted votes. I had more. The move was simple and cruel, the kind the world forgives if you wear the right suit. I gave compliance context. I fed legal concerns. I turned Carter's memos into a pattern of erratic escalation. A man too close to the work to maintain judgment. Words are scalpels when you sharpen them slowly. They don't scream, they separate. I even staged the meeting where his keycard failed. He pressed the reader twice, then turned and looked at me through glass neither of us had cleaned. I didn't blink. "You think betrayal explodes? It doesn't, it clicks." His wife Nora left 2 months later. No drama, just a mailbox key and a quiet forwarding address. I saw him once in the lobby afterward, hair uncombed, tie loose, holding a cardboard box like it weighed more than his bones. "You did this," he said, not accusing, just naming weather. "We did this," I corrected, already halfway past him. "We chose different fires." He laughed once, dry like a hinge that gave up. "You didn't choose fire," he said. "You chose ash." The firm applauded my stability plan. The papers called me the adult in the room. I told Adam over takeout. He nodded like a polite stranger. He was 19, home for a weekend he hadn't planned, and he had that stiff posture boys learn when they're trying not to beg for something they've already lost. "Carter was your friend," he said. I said, "Carter was a risk." He pushed his rice away. "So am I." We didn't talk about it again because he stopped calling me Dad the next week. "Sir, old man, nothing." 6 months later, Carter's son jumped. The river doesn't argue, it takes. I stood by the bridge that night and counted the bolts in the rail because numbers calm me when prayer refuses. I found the police tape in the weeds. Yellow turned the color of old teeth. The current kept its own counsel. I phoned no one. I went home and ironed a shirt I didn't need just to feel heat on a fabric I could control. When Adam heard the news, he sent me a single text. What did it cost him to buy my future? I typed answers until the phone grew warm under my thumb. I sent none. I started seeing Carter everywhere after that. Bar mirrors. Train windows. A face caught in the corner of a monitor, half light, half smoke. I'd look up and there he'd be across the room, whiskey shaking in a hand that used to hold blueprints steady. He never said a word. He didn't need to. His silence itemized my choices. He'd raise his glass an inch. Communion or curse, I couldn't tell. Then return it to the coaster like a man reshelving an old book he can't finish and can't forget. I slept with the TV on for a month so the room would have noise. Guilt hates company, but it hates quiet more. I told myself I'd kept Adam safe. That one day when the world calmed down, I'd explain how power works, how you can spend dignity like currency if you spend it to buy shelter. Then I passed a bus stop poster with Carter's son's school photo on it. soft grin, crooked collar, and I heard my brain make a sound I'd never heard before, a nail bending when you try to drive it through the wrong wood. I couldn't look at that picture and call what I'd done protection. I could only call it winning. And that made me exactly the kind of man I'd sworn I was saving the city from. The first time I walked into the bar where Carter waited, I rehearsed apologies like lines I'd never earned the right to say. The bartender knew my name, that hurt. Carter didn't turn when I slid onto the stool beside him. He kept staring into the amber as if the glass might reflect a version of the world he could bury me in. I brought the file, I said, placing a thin envelope on the wood. He didn't touch it. Adam doesn't want your money, he said, eyes never leaving the drink. Neither did my boy. The envelope felt wrong under my fingers, too light like I'd tried to tape morality to currency and expected it to weigh more. It's not a payoff, I said. It's a story finished the right way. He smiled without teeth. You don't finish stories, Hale, you stage them. He finally looked at me. The eyes do different work after grief. They appraise with the steadiness of a ledger. You chose to keep your boy's name clean, he said. You wrote mine in mud. I almost said I had to. I almost said there was no other way. Instead, I said I was afraid. He blinked once, slow. Good, he said. It means you were human before you sold the rest. He slid the whiskey away like it was poison he'd finally recognized. What does it feel like, he asked. To bury a man standing up? My throat closed around an answer no sentence could carry. You don't bury men like me, I managed. We rot above ground in good suits with better stories. His laugh came out like a cough. Rot careful then. When I left, the envelope was still on the bar. The bartender tucked it under the register like a pity he'd learned to store for later. I walked into rain that felt personal. Every drop struck like a small sentence. You want the recipe? Fine. Take a man who calls you brother. Add a contract that smells like fresh paint over mold. Fold in fear, yours, not his. Stir it with a boardroom full of mouths that say risk management when they mean sacrifice someone else. Bake it under lights that never blink. Slice clean. Plate as leadership. Smile for the cameras. Tell your son you did it for him. Try not to vomit when he stops using your name. Temple and Marrow called their clause a stability rider. It allowed emergency reallocations if public trust was threatened. Public trust means donor headlines. It never means neighborhoods. Carter found the writer. He flagged it. He wrote this is fraud in the margin and underlined fraud so hard the paper wore thin. I took a photo of the page and sent it to my private email, then deleted the original like a man wiping a fingerprint off a glass he plans to return to the shelf. I told myself I'd fix it in the morning. But the morning brought a call from the deputy mayor, and by the time the coffee cooled, the choice was made. We wouldn't expose the writer. We'd redirect it, and we'd call it reform. The day of the vote, Carter brought me coffee the way he always had on hard mornings. No sugar, he said. The old joke, the old partnership ritual. I didn't drink it. He set it on the windowsill, steam fading. He started to speak. I cut him off. If you choke a goodbye fast enough, you can call it logistics. You're off the file, I said, sliding the HR letter across glass. For your own protection. He read the letter twice like a man making sure the train really did leave the track. For mine, he repeated. Not for Adam's. I swallowed. Both. He folded the letter neatly, put it in his pocket, and nodded like a soldier who knows the order he won't follow. You can still do one decent thing, he said, stepping close enough that I saw the flecks of gold in his eyes. Tell your boy the truth. Don't make him carry a clean version of a dirty thing. I stared at my reflection in the window because I couldn't stand to see the person speaking to me. He'll understand, I said. Carter exhaled like a tire going soft. You mean he'll forgive you? Different math. After he left, I found the coffee on the sill, cold. I drank it anyway. Regret has a temperature. The jump came on a Tuesday. Always a work day. People like us prefer tragedies that don't ruin weekends. I was mid-call with a donor when the notification hit the corner of my screen. Incident on East Ridge Bridge, traffic delays. The city app filled with red. The board text thread vibrated into life with weather words. Situation, unconfirmed, sensitive. I closed my office door and sat on the floor like I used to when Adam was 5 and got nosebleeds. The kind that look worse than they are until they aren't. I waited for someone else to say his name. No one did. We don't say names when the river takes them. We say youth. We say tragedy. We say resources will be made available. We never say boy. We never say son. I didn't go to the funeral. Carter didn't invite me, and I pretended etiquette was mercy. I sent flowers that smelled like guilt dressed as lilies. Nora sent the card back with no note. Grief edits language down to the bone. When Adam found out I'd skipped the service, he came to my house with a box of his childhood. Matchbox cars, a green felt cape, the clay coin dish I still kept by the bed. He set it all on the kitchen island like he was returning a rental. You said you did it for me, he said, voice sounded low. But I have to live with it. So who'd you really do it for? I reached for him and watched him step back. Not far. Far enough to measure. You trade lives like chips, he said. Then you call it budgeting. I wanted to tell him about nights I didn't sleep, about letters I didn't send, about envelopes on bars and windows I couldn't clean. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I wanted to be the kind of man a city trusted. And I wanted my son to be the kind of man who never had to ask what that cost. I chose wanting over honesty. That's all. The board loved my post-crisis roadmap. We cut the rotten rider and called the wound leadership. Press conferences are just hospitals for reputations. They stabilize you long enough to discharge you back into the same choices. I became the face of reform again. Cameras like faces that don't blink. I didn't blink, except at night. Then I blinked so hard the darkness stuttered. I saw Carter 3 more times in that bar. The second time, he brought me a photocopy, my signature slanting into the corner of a letter authorizing the stability rider reallocations. You filed this, he said. I did, I said. To protect the fund. He shook his head. To protect your reflection. He sat the copy between us and set his glass on top. The ring it left looked like a halo turned sideways. You know what I hate most? He asked. You did it well. I said nothing because that was the only sentence that didn't ask for self-defense. Good luck with your good life, he added. It won't love you back. When he left, I pocketed the photocopy like a man stealing his own mugshot. The third time was the night Adam blocked my number. The message delivered. Blue, then gray. The small mechanical death of a line that had carried birthday songs and bad jokes, and the sound of his breath when he fell asleep reading and forgot to hang up. I sat there with the disconnected weight of a phone that had stopped believing in me, and Carter slid onto the stool without looking at me. He's a good kid, he said. I nodded. So was yours. We drank in parallel, the truce of men who know sentences can't resurrect. Do you ever? I started, then stopped because questions like that make a fool of themselves halfway through. Every day, he said. That's the job now. I turned the photocopy he'd given me over and over until the paper frayed. I'm sorry, I said, tasting iron. I know. He set his glass down gently, like placing a stone on a grave. You know what comes after sorry? He asked. I waited. Stop. He pushed away from the bar and left me with a bill I couldn't pay in cash, so I started stopping. Not loudly, not theatrically. Quiet cuts. Sunset resignations disguised as spending more time with family while I spent more time with a list. Contacts to sever. Donors to return money to. A policy memo that read like a confession if you held it under the right light. I called the deputy mayor and told him the contract landscape had shifted. I told legal to draft reversals. I told comms to prepare for a storm with no umbrella strategy. Then I took the photocopy and mailed it to myself. Evidence has more courage when it travels alone. You can't undo a bridge. You can't unteach a river to take. I knew that. Stopping wasn't redemption. It was triage. To keep the wound from swallowing what was left of my son's view of me. You don't bury men like me, I told the mirror. We rot above ground, our suits keep the bugs respectful. I practiced saying I was wrong until the sentence stopped sounding like a translation and started sounding like breath. At the 4th time I saw Carter, he wasn't drinking. He was just there, hands flat on the bar like he was testing whether wood could hold the weight of what he couldn't drop. You came to fire me once, he said, almost smiling. Now you come to retire yourself. I nodded. I thought it would fix something in me. He shook his head. It fixes the city a little. Not you. He leaned in and I smelled tobacco and rain. You want to do one thing that isn't for you? Give your boy a version of the truth that costs you more than it costs him. I swallowed. He won't answer. Then talk anyway, he said. Confessions don't need witnesses. Just weather. I walked out into exactly that, weather. Cold street. Wet air, a wind sharp enough to make the eyes weep on behalf of men who won't. I chose the bridge because lying feels smaller there. The water takes your voice and returns it altered, like it translated you into something the sky might allow. I stood where the railing paint peels into flakes that look like snow if you're merciful, and like dandruff if you aren't. I pressed call, straight to voicemail. Adam's recorded voice still used, "Hey, it's me." And I closed my eyes because the casual tone is a holy thing you don't know you worship until it leaves the room. "Son," I said, and the word snagged, thin wire catching on old scar. "It's me. I won't use your new names for me tonight. I'll earn whatever you decide to call me after this." The river breathed. I kept my voice even, not out of control, but out of respect, like dress shoes at a funeral you don't deserve to attend. I made it easy to be proud of me in public because I made it hard to be proud of me in private. I told myself I was building you a future. I was building me a legend and making you carry it. A siren far off. An engine upshifted. The world continued to refuse my timetable. "I don't want forgiveness in exchange for facts," I said. "I want to lay down the thing I kept making you trip over." I told him about the rider, about the vote, about the card that didn't read for a man who brought me coffee without sugar. I told him I kept a copy of my own signature because sometimes the only way to hold a sin is to make it paper. I told him I watched the news alert and sat on the floor and stared at a grate until the pattern melted. I told him I didn't go to the funeral because I was a coward pretending to be considerate. "I can't pay back what was taken," I said, "but I can stop glowing when people say my name." The voicemail timer ticked like a metronome turned judge. "If there's anything left of us, I'll be at the bar. The one with the neon that can't decide whether it's alive. I'll be there every Friday at 7, for as long as it takes for you to walk in or for the room to teach me you won't." I hung up. I didn't cry. Not because I'm strong. Because I've cried every way a man can cry except the one that matters. Out loud where someone can hear the weight of it. Friday came like a dare. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat at the end, the stool that lists a degree to the left. The bartender nodded. Men like him keep a ledger of nods the way priests keep homilies. Carter wasn't there. Good. Bad. Both. At 7:13, the door opened and the room did the animal thing rooms do when a person enters who matters to someone already inside. Adam stood in the doorway, rain in his hair, jaw set like a verdict he hadn't decided whether to read. He walked in without scanning for me. He didn't need to. Blood draws lines even when it refuses names. He sat one stool away. He ordered water. He didn't look at me. The bartender placed a coaster like an oath. "Your message cut off," he said. "I said enough," I answered. He sipped. He swallowed like it hurt. He spoke without looking. "Did you trade his life for mine?" "No," I said, and my mouth tried to add not exactly the way a snake tries to keep its fangs by habit. I forced the addendum down. "I traded my soul for my illusion of yours." He let out a breath that wasn't a laugh. "That's poetry. It's accounting," I said. "The only kind I have left." We sat with the math. Behind us, a TV murmured about markets. Somewhere ice cracked in a bucket with the intimacy of bones. "Why here?" he asked. "Because this is where I stood every time I pretended I didn't know how to go home," I said. "Because I wanted the room to remember the shape of my cowardice when I changed it." He turned then, just enough that I could see the boy and the man inside the same face, trading custody back and forth. "If I forgive you," he said, "does he come back?" He meant Carter's son. He meant the version of me he could love without a caveat. He meant 1,000 doors. "No," I said. "Forgiveness doesn't resurrect. It just lets the living move their furniture." He faced forward again. He set the glass down with 2 fingers, careful not to make sound. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Witness," I said. "Not applause. Not repair, just stay long enough to see me stop." "What does stopping look like?" "Smaller rooms," I said. "Fewer microphones. Money leaving instead of arriving. My name where it belongs, in footnotes next to mistakes, not on plaques." He nodded once. He stood. I felt my ribs brace for vacancy. "Friday," he said, not looking at me. 7, then he left. The door clicked. The neon flickered. The stool beside me was either an empty seat or a set table, depending on whether you believe in weather forecasts. I finished my club soda like it was whiskey I'd finally earned the right not to drink. The bartender wiped the bar with the gravity of a sacristan. When I rose to go, he slid an envelope from under the register, the same one I'd left months back. He told me to keep this, he said. Said one day you'd need it more than he would. Inside, the photocopy of my signature, the circle of whiskey ring like a saint's tarnished crown. On the back, in Carter's hand, 2 words make scar. I walked to the bridge. I took out a pen. I wrote a statement for the paper that didn't sound like a press release and didn't ask for understanding. I listed names, there's mine. I attached the copy. I hit send. My phone buzzed with the small, clean cruelty of message sent. I leaned on the rail and waited for the night to argue. It didn't. You want a moral? I don't trust those anymore. Here's what I have. There are men who bury their dead and there are men who carry them. I tried to do neither. I hovered, I justified, I refined. It made me shiny and it made me hollow. Carter taught me that rot is patient. Adam taught me that love is too, but only if you stop asking it to lift what you refuse to set down. On my way home, I passed the bus stop poster again. The sun had bleached the edges. Someone had taped a new notice below, a hotline number, a list of free clinics, a memorial date. I touched the edge of the paper the way you touch a doorframe leaving a house you built wrong and are learning to fix. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Morning would come with headlines and hearings and the slow, unglamorous work of removing my name from rooms it never earned. None of that felt like punishment. It felt like finally paying a bill I'd been forwarding to other people's mailboxes. Before dawn, I sent Adam one line. I'll be there next Friday, too. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay, it isn't victory. It isn't absolution. It is a chair at a bar that will know our elbows by winter. The hum of neon learning our faces. The bartender memorizing who we become when we stop performing. It is a scar forming where a legend used to sit. It is the sound of a river refusing to return what it took, and the sound of 2 men deciding to build a bridge you cross by staying. I once said, you don't bury men like me. Maybe I was half right. You don't bury us. You plant us in smaller ground and watch if anything honest grows. He planned it, every second of it. And I, like the fool I always was when it came to my son, thought he came to forgive me. The night began like theater. Lights too warm, laughter too scripted, champagne sweating in flutes while old men told stories about me that were half true and half convenient. The hall was all glass and gold, expensive transparency and the illusion of reflection. My wife smiled like porcelain, holding herself together in that delicate way people do when they know something's already cracked. Then Adam stood up. No clinking of glass, no smile. Just stood, his posture sharp the way truth stands when it's ready to stab. I remember the exact sound the microphone made when he plugged in his flash drive. A click, a hum, a new frequency entering the air. The projector came alive behind me. For a second, I thought it was a slideshow. Childhood pictures, maybe. Nostalgia before closure, but it wasn't. The first image was a document header with my firm's logo. The second, a name I'd erased years ago. Then another. And another. Names, signatures, timestamps, transaction trails. My empire of necessity lit up on a 40-foot screen for everyone to see. A murmur ran through the room, low and contagious. The kind that moves through people before understanding does. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, Jesus Christ. My hands didn't move. My pulse didn't either. Then the audio started. My voice. My goddamn voice, I recognized it instantly. The confession I'd recorded years ago on a dictaphone late one night when guilt first began to taste like metal. I never meant to show it. It was supposed to be therapy, a private reckoning. But now every syllable was public scripture. Every life I ruined, my voice said, hollow through the speakers. I told myself it was to save my son. Laughter stopped. Utensils froze mid-air. My wife's hand fell from her glass, the ring catching the light before it disappeared into shadow. Adam didn't look at me. He stared straight at the audience like a preacher forcing his congregation to look at their God and see what he really was. The recording kept going. Carter warned me. I didn't listen. I said I was protecting my family. But truth is, I was protecting the lie that made me powerful. The projector flickered through emails, transfers, internal memos, me, signing everything I swore I hadn't. The proof of every compromise I'd buried under good intentions. My whole career, my reputation, boiled down to evidence and guilt. Someone tried to cut the feed, but Adam had thought of that too. The files duplicated, mirrored on the main display. Redundancy. He learned that from me, a cruel symmetry. The crowd started to shift. Colleagues whispered. Reporters lifted phones. I saw the first flash, camera or lightning, I couldn't tell. The applause that had greeted me 10 minutes earlier had turned to static silence. I glanced at my wife. Tears quiet. Not rage, not shock, just release. Like she'd been waiting for this storm her whole life, and now finally it arrived. The recording hit its final line. One day my son will understand why men like me lie. Maybe he'll hate me for it. Maybe he'll become me. And then silence. A silence that didn't feel like absence, it felt like judgment. Adam unplugged the drive, slipped it into his pocket, and turned. His chair scraped against the floor like a blade. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The truth had already taken my place at the table. I just sat there, hands folded, watching the room fill with whispers and phones and eyes that couldn't look directly at me. I didn't move until the lights came up. When they did, I whispered, so quietly that only the ghost of my own pride could hear me. He took my name and made it mean something honest. The silence that followed the tape wasn't ordinary silence. It was the kind that rearranges the air, the kind that makes every breath sound like a confession. People didn't move right away. They just stared at me, at the screen, at the wreckage of an evening meant to celebrate a career that no longer existed. The lights buzzed faintly above. I could hear the projectors cooling, metal ticking as it released the heat of exposure. My name glowed dim on the banner behind me. Jonathan Hale, 35 years of integrity. The irony made the room smaller. The CEO cleared his throat, but no words followed. Someone clapped once, not applause, just nerves, and the sound died mid-air. A journalist I knew from the Ledger started typing. Flash, 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 the moment was already news. My wife leaned close, her perfume like the memory of a better decade. He warned you, she whispered, not with anger, with grief. He said one day you'd build something even he couldn't destroy. She stood up before I could answer. Walked out, no coat, no glance back. The kind of exit people remember longer than speeches. Adam was gone, of course, vanished into the dark before anyone could reach him. I'd taught him that, how to move unseen when you needed to. Funny how the worst lessons are the ones they learn best. I sat there a while, pretending to adjust my cufflinks as if control could be restored by symmetry. The crowd began to move. Whispers, sideways glances, the quick footsteps of people afraid to be seen staying too long. Then I heard it. The faintest echo from the hallway. My own voice still looping, distorted through an open speaker. Every life I ruined. I told myself it was to save my son. The sound followed me as I left. Outside, the night had teeth. Rain came down in hard, precise lines, slicing through the glow of the streetlights. The city felt complicit, too bright, too awake. I loosened my tie, but it didn't help. Some knots live under the skin. I drove aimlessly for an hour. Headlights cutting through streets that looked suddenly foreign. Every billboard, every office window felt like an accusation. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from the board, from reporters, from people who called me friend last week and liability now. But I didn't answer any of them. I only opened one text. It was from Adam, no words. Just a single file name. Truth move, he'd sent it before the party began. Scheduled delivery. Of course he had. When I played it, the video started with my study, the same desk, the same lamp. My voice younger, more certain. For the record, I said on screen, none of this was supposed to happen. It's all for him. For Adam, then it cut, abrupt, surgical. The rest of me left unsaid. Like he wanted to leave space for his version. The message that followed was short. You said you wanted your legacy to last. Now it will. I stared at it until the rain blurred the letters. The next morning, the story broke in full color. The architect's collapse. Integrity exposed. The son who brought down the father. The headlines had rhythm. The photos didn't. They caught me between blinks, between masks. Half shame, half shock. My office door was locked when I arrived. Security stood by, polite and firm. My access card blinked red, the same color as the flash drive Adam had used. The same shade as guilt when it turns physical. Inside, through the glass, I could see boxes. My life condensed to cardboard. A secretary, new, uncomfortable, avoided my eyes. She didn't know she was watching history fold itself into silence. I didn't knock. I just walked away. Later that afternoon, I found myself at the old pier, the same one where Carter and I once stood smoking cigars after our first big deal. Back then, we thought the world bent for men with ambition. Turns out it only waits long enough to watch them fall. I sat on the railing, the air thick with salt and memory. Somewhere below, the waves hit the pylons with mechanical rhythm. I thought of Carter's son, of the bridge, of Adam's face as he hit play. I could still hear the crowd, not the gasp, but the silence after it. The moment a lifetime of noise ends in truth. That's when I realized something painful, something clean. He didn't ruin me. He finished what I started. I don't remember driving home. Only the sound of tires on wet asphalt and the faint hum of a news anchor repeating my name like an obituary. When I opened the door, the house was dark except for the glow of the television. My wife's suitcase sat by the stairs. She wasn't leaving in anger, she was leaving in clarity. The way people step out of a burning building, not because they hate it, but because it's finally admitting what it is. On the coffee table lay the flash drive, the same one Adam had used, wrapped in a note, written in his small, careful handwriting. You said once that truth was a tool. I wanted to see what it could build if you stopped using it as a weapon. I sat there a long time. The rain had stopped. The world was too quiet. I turned the drive over in my hand. It was light, almost weightless. Funny how destruction never weighs what it should. Then I plugged it in. The screen lit up with a final file. Voice number 2 MP3 behind my voice again. Older now, hoarse like a man running out of defenses. If you're hearing this, I guess you finally learned where the bodies are buried, I said. Then a pause. A laugh that didn't survive the breath that made it. You think I did it to protect you, Adam? Maybe I did. Maybe I did it to prove I still could. Static. Then silence. I pressed stop and realized my own words had built the gallows. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the same chair where I'd first recorded that confession years ago. The same hum of the desk lamp, the same hum of regret. I kept replaying the moment Adam stood up, the quiet precision of it. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He simply revealed. That's what made it perfect. Revenge isn't about volume. It's about timing. I poured myself a drink I didn't taste. The ice melted before I could swallow. The truth was, I had built my career on exposure, on knowing where to shine the light, when to turn it off, and who to leave in the dark. I should have known one day the light would turn back on me, and now it had. I looked at my reflection in the black of the TV screen. My face, older, unfamiliar. So this is it, I said aloud. The legacy, no applause, no redemption. Just a man watching his own voice destroy everything he thought would outlive him. But somewhere under the ruin, a strange calm began to bloom. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't hiding anything, and maybe that was worth the wreckage. Morning came pale and heavy. The city felt quieter, like it was holding its breath to see what kind of man would crawl out of the headlines. I opened the door to find 2 envelopes on the step. One white, one black. The white one, legal letterhead. Termination, pending investigation. Predictable. The black one, Adam's handwriting again. Inside, a single line. You always said truth costs more than lies. I just sent the bill, no anger. Just fact. I folded the note, put it in my pocket, and stepped outside. The air smelled of wet concrete and consequence. I didn't go to the office. I didn't call my wife. I drove to the one place I knew would still have Carter's picture on the wall. The old bar by the river. The bartender didn't say my name, just poured. On the TV above, they were replaying the video. My voice again. That same line looped for drama. Every life I ruined, I told myself it was to save my son. I watched it like it was someone else's sin. Maybe that's how you survive it. You turn guilt into a story, one chapter removed. The bartender slid a coaster my way. On it, in faded ink, someone had written, "He took your name and gave it meaning." I almost laughed. Almost. When I stepped back into the daylight, the river was gold in the distance. The same river that took Carter's boy. The same one that reflected the city's lies like a mirror that forgave nothing. I walked to the edge, hands in my pockets, and whispered to the wind, You did what I couldn't, Adam. You told the truth out loud. A seagull screamed overhead, sharp and human, and then I said it. The sentence I'd carried like a splinter since the party. He took my name and made it mean something honest. The words felt right. Not absolution, not defeat, just honest. For the first time in years, that was enough. I turned away from the river and walked into the morning. The sun was behind me. The city didn't clap. It just watched, the way it always does, waiting to see if a man who once built lies could learn how to live without them. I didn't chase him that night. Didn't defend myself. Didn't raise my voice to the crowd that had already made up its mind. Maybe because somewhere beneath the panic and humiliation, a small, tired part of me finally understood. He was right. Now, weeks later, I stand in the same hall. It smells different now. No champagne, no flowers, no laughter pretending to mean anything. Just dust and the faint ghost of applause that doesn't belong to me anymore. The banner's gone. The stage is bare. Only the lights hum, low and apologetic, like they know they've been left on too long. I walk to the same spot where Adam stood. The microphone is still there, tilted slightly forward, the angle of accusation. I run my thumb across it and feel static, the leftover hum of a man who used it better than I ever did. The glass I never finished sits on a nearby table, flat with age, rim-stained faintly with the night's last lie. I lift it anyway because old habits don't die. They linger, waiting for you to remember who you used to be. I should have spoken that night. Not the speech they wrote for me, the one about mentorship, legacy, gratitude. I should have told the truth, even if it tore the walls down faster than Adam's video did. Because the truth had been waiting, patient and poisonous under every toast I ever made. I look at the empty chairs, the neat rows still marked by scuff lines from heels and polished shoes. I imagine their faces again, the polite horror, the suppressed curiosity, the sudden realization that they'd been clapping for a man who'd mistaken control for integrity. I remember how my wife's eyes didn't scream. They forgave. That's what broke me. Forgiveness, when undeserved, cuts deeper than anger. I lift the microphone, click it on. It crackles weakly, like an old confession testing the air. If I had said something that night, I begin, it would have gone like this. My voice echoes in the empty space, soft but heavy like the beginning of a prayer. I didn't ruin lives for fun. I ruined them because I thought survival meant sacrifice. Because I believed my family's comfort could justify someone else's fall. I built an empire on a lie that called itself love. I paused, staring at the back of the hall, the door Adam walked through. I used to think he'd thank me one day. That when he saw what I protected him from, he'd understand why I did it. But maybe he'll grow into the kind of man who never has to. A single light flickers above the stage. I could turn it off. I don't. Some truths deserve to be seen under harsh light. Every empire ends, I whisper. Some just burn slower than others. I set the glass down. It doesn't clink, it sighs. And for a moment I feel the room breathe with me, empty, but alive in its honesty. I sit on the edge of the stage, elbows on knees, the way I used to when I was younger, when ideas still felt clean before they got tangled in ambition. There's a draft from the broken vent above. It smells like old wood and endings. My phone lights up in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. Just a single word, saw. No name, no punctuation. But I know it's him. I type out 100 replies. None of them sound right. None of them sound like a father. So I delete them all and just stare at the blank screen, thinking about how silence became our second language. Love built on silence turns into rot. Slow, invisible. Until one day you wake up surrounded by what you thought you were preserving. I stand and walk to the door. Halfway there, I stop. Because it hits me. This room, this moment, and this is the real retirement. Not the applause, not the plaques, not the speeches. This is where the career ends and the man begins. I look back at the stage and almost laugh. If someone walked in right now, they'd see an old man in a suit talking to ghosts. But maybe that's all I've ever been doing. Talking to ghosts. Of the men I betrayed, the wife I disappointed, the son who finally learned how to fight back the only way I taught him, strategically. I pick up the microphone one last time. This time I don't rehearse, I just speak. To whoever finds this recording or whatever remains of me in memory, know this. Power doesn't corrupt. It seduces. It tells you you're doing good while it eats your name alive from the inside. I walk back to the table, set my phone down next to the glass, and hit record. I did it for love, I say. But love that hides is just fear with better manners. I thought protecting him meant keeping him blind. Turns out I only raised a man who saw clearer than I ever did. The words hang there, weightless. Somewhere outside, thunder murmurs. Distant, delayed, like applause arriving too late. I raise the glass. Not to success. Not to survival, to the truth, I whisper. The only thing I ever built that outlived me. I drink. The taste is bitter, honest. The kind of flavor that doesn't fade. The lights go out a moment later, leaving me in quiet, unedited dark. I smile. Small. Human. Good night, Adam, I say into the black. You were right to play the tape.